will be given by Dr. Samuel Godfrey, who is no stranger to us in the region. Dr. Godfrey is the former Director General of Health Canada's Food Directorate, which is Canada's food standard setting body. He is a former Vice Chair of the FAO-WHO Codex Alimentarius Commission, and currently he is a full professor of food risk analysis and regulatory policies in the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences at the University of Laval. Professor Godfrey is internationally known and currently serves as a senior food science and regulatory expert on a number of advisory bodies. So we are very pleased to have Samuel here with us this afternoon, and I will now invite him to the floor to make his presentation. Thank you. Dr. Godfrey, over to you.
Thank you very much, Janet, and good afternoon to you all. It's a true privilege to be part of this event, and I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be with you. I would like also to echo the previous speakers in presenting my congratulations to Dr. Peters for his appointment at the helm of CAFSA. As Janet mentioned, I was given the task to introduce Codex to you, even though Codex does not need introduction, and really to try to emphasize the strategic importance of this organization. I think for those who know me, one of my biggest challenges would be to be able to deliver this presentation in less than 10 minutes that was awarded to this segment. So I'm going to go through really the rationale for harmonization of standards and actually say a few words of introduction about the work of Codex and a short introduction to the work of CCFL. Now, starting with why do we need to harmonize food standards? And even though, again, this is no longer a question that anybody asks, but if it were to be asked, there are at least two answers that can be provided. Well, first of all, we know that by 2050, the world population will reach a milestone of over 9 billion individuals. And all these individuals will need to access the same level of protection as far as food safety and even food quality is concerned. And this is across the globe. The second element is that foods have been and continue to be, despite even the pandemic, food continue to be one of the most traded commodities in the world. Basically, over $2 trillion worth of food continue to be traded. And the food and agri-food production sector represents a key sector for a number of economies around the world. And that sector also relies heavily on trade and particularly on international trade. If we take a simple food, something as simple as a loaf of bread, we can see that this is actually a citizen of the world as far as its composition is concerned. You have ingredients and sub-ingredients that are sourced from all over the world. And despite some of the disruptions in the supply chains that we've witnessed with COVID-19, still, essentially, we are seeing international trade of food ingredients to be the norm. Another element really to mention is that consumer expectations are universal. All consumers, wherever they are, in any country, regardless of the level of development of that country, aspire to have access to safe, nutritious, and high quality food products. Food regulators are also subjected to the same level of scrutiny, which is essentially to provide the level of oversight that is needed to ensure that foods are safe and also of a quality that is expected by consumers, but also are providing an environment that is equitable and fair to the various food business operators. And there is also an expectation that foods that are imported, so essentially coming from other countries, would be at the same level of treatment in terms of their requirements of safety and quality. All this cannot be achieved unless we have a global reference. International standards are essentially the enablers for all these elements. And again, if we go quickly now through history, we see how international standards have served us and how they essentially led the way for change in food regulatory systems around the world. We owe to Codex for over 6 decades now that this organization has been serving us we owe this organization the fact that it leveled the playing field between nations as far as the oversight on food. We owe to Codex the ability to address emerging issues by providing the level of guidance needed. I'm sure that some of you remember, even though it's actually over 11 years ago, the melamine incidents, or even more than that, the melamine incidents, when that hit, everybody was looking for guidance at the international level, and that guidance was provided by Codex in a record time. Codex developed a standard in 1 year period. Other emerging issues when we went through the Fukushima incident, the foundations of radionuclide assessment was provided by the advisory bodies to Codex. In areas that are closer to our discussion, areas of food labeling, we've witnessed in a number of jurisdictions that they waited for an international standard on allergen labeling before adopting the practices and the mandatory requirement of allergen labeling in their own domestic regulation. And that was also the case for nutrition labeling. Now, if we go back to history, Codex is one of the representations of the joint FAO-WHO Food Standards Program, which essentially consists in the 3 independent parts, but very much complementary: the scientific advice, the standard setting body that is the Codex Alimentarius Commission, but also the capacity building and the technical assistance program. And Codex was born, again, now close to 6 decades ago in 1963 as an intergovernmental body. Currently, I would say the number of countries that are part of Codex definitely exceeds those who are not. Most every country in the world is part of Codex. We have 189 members in the organization, essentially 188 countries, and 1 member organization that is the European Union. Codex also is a forum where stakeholders, so beyond essentially governments, beyond competent authorities, we do have stakeholders that contribute to the availability of food or are impacted by the safety and the quality of food that are part of the discussion. And in fact, the number of observers in Codex proceedings exceed the number of members. We have 239 observers, out of which 164 non-government organizations. Now, the mandate of Codex has been defined as having as a primary objective to protect the health of consumers, but also to ensure fair practices in the food trade. So essentially providing that environment that will give, to a certain extent, equal opportunities for those who are producing and trading food products. And it is one of the largest forums of collaborations around the world, aiming to coordinate all food standards work at the international level. Now, brief really summary of how Codex works. Again, Codex works really based on a level of expertise provided by its subsidiary bodies, those technical committees. And we see in Codex 4 types of bodies: the general subject committees, which we call also horizontal committees. CCFL, the Codex Committee on Food Labeling, is one of those. We also have commodity-specific committees, which develop standards for specific foods or classes of foods, as opposed to the horizontal committees, which develop standards regardless to the type of food. They apply to all foods. We also have ad hoc intergovernmental task forces time-limited ones like the one we have right now, looking at the management requirements for antimicrobial resistance. And we also have the opportunity of coordinating work at the regional level, thanks to the FAO, WHO regional coordinating committees, and CCLAC, the Codex Committee for Latin America and the Caribbean, is one of the representations of that. Now, you will hear a lot about food labeling and the Codex Committee on Food Labeling later on, and Dr. Ballantyne will be speaking more in depth about this committee and its work. But let me say again and reiterate really the foundational work of this committee. Several jurisdictions around the world weighted and actually used the guidance from CCFL, particularly as it regards to areas as complex as managing nutrition labeling or allergen labeling. And we're seeing again CCFL continuing its work in this area with the opening of the allergen file again, but also in addressing an emerging issue that is the front of pack nutrition labeling. Now, the importance of Codex is also highlighted in the way the work of the organization is recognized in international treaties, and particularly through WTO agreements. So the SPS agreement specifically identifies Codex standards and guidelines as an international benchmark. The TBT agreement also refers to international standards in general, of which Codex is one of the illustration. And of course, we owe to Codex the scientific foundations of decisions, and therefore the reference that we all go back to when we try to anchor the decisions of our food regulatory system, so our food regulatory decisions, in science and in evidence. And the advisory bodies to Codex represent a reference for us all. So again, really one of the highlights that I would like to reiterate about the value of Codex being that largest forum of international collaboration in relation with food, and how much actually this organization has and continues to play a role in leveling the playing field for food regulatory oversight and providing the level of protection that consumers expect around the world. Hopefully, this helps in opening the way for further discussions, and I hope I made it within the 10 minutes required. Thank you very much again for the invitation, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Godfrey, for an excellent presentation. You really was able to bring to the fore the details on Codex in terms of very concisely, and really this has set the foundation for the following presentation. So thank you very much. We will move to our second presentation, which